Welcome to Christian World News, everyone. I'm Wendy Griffith.
And I'm Mark Martin. In the days after the passing of George Herbert Walker Bush, Americans celebrated a life well lived. The former president began a lifetime of service at 18 years old when he joined the Navy to fight in World War II. He eventually became the 41st president of the United States. This week, we learned about his quiet faith and the Christian principles that guided him. Among them was a reliance on prayer. During his presidency, he spoke with CBN founder Pat Robertson about the need for prayer in the Oval Office.
Abraham Lincoln said he couldn't handle the job except on his knees. Have you found recourse to God in prayer often in your presidency?
You have to. The more I'm there, the more I understood what Lincoln meant. The more I understood the need to have some lift, some strength greater than yourself. I especially found that at the time I had to make this, now it looks easy, but a crucial decision about committing someone else's sons and daughters into combat. And the decision rests only with the president for that, only the president. And there was certainly time and need for prayer on that one.
And Gary Lane is former Washington bureau chief for CBN News and joins us for more. Gary, you had the opportunity to meet President Bush. Well,
yes.
Tell us your impressions.
Well, I met him before he was president during the 1980 primary in Michigan. He ran against Ronald Reagan. My impression at the time, he was a very pleasant man, very friendly and warm. He seemed to care about me. He put me at ease because as a young reporter, I was very nervous about meeting someone who may become president. But he was delightful, Wendy, very pleasant and kind.
He described himself as a man of quiet faith. Did you see that played out as you were covering him?
I think in Washington, yes. I mean, look, he was raised as an Episcopalian, so the belief was you don't wear your faith on your sleeve. You're very private about your faith. So it was very hard for George H.W. Bush to talk about things Christian and about his faith. But it played out in his policies. He was very much pro-life, even though Barbara, his wife, was not. And he, as a child, was raised with his mother reading from the Bible every morning, is what he said.
Well, he's been described as a humble servant. Those are biblical qualities that seem to be much lacking in Washington today. Did you think the same?
Yeah, he was very humble, and I think that's a little something that is lacking from Washington, D.C. and our leaders today. He was not a polarizing figure. He tried to get along with everyone. Of course, he had a Democratic Congress, and he was a Republican. He had to get along. But he always went back to his faith, I think, Wendy, because he was taught that those that are given much, much is required, and he believed that. In addition to that, one of his favorite verses was Proverbs 27. And in that verse it says, don't allow another man to praise you, or allow another man to praise you, not your own lips.
Right.
So he was taught humility from a young age, and he lived that out as president.
We're not seeing that much with our current president.
Well, I think a lot of our leaders were not seeing that from. It's all about themselves.
The last 2 days, the eulogies and the ceremonies that we've seen have been so extraordinary and so heartwarming. Can you recall a time when we've seen a president honored to this extent?
You know, even Reagan wasn't honored to this extent, Wendy. I think it's because Bush was someone who did try to get along. And what goes on in Washington is you get two extremes. You know, when you have a president who appears a bit extreme, then the opposite side, the left, becomes more extreme in their rhetoric and the way they respond. So George W. Bush was not considered an extreme person. Many conservatives would say he was more like a Democrat, and that's why everyone loves him.
Yeah, but he'll be missed. Thanks so much, Gary.
Sure.
Presidents, world leaders, family, and friends joined the Bush family to celebrate his life at the National Cathedral. As White House correspondent Ben Kennedy shows us, it was a time of laughter, tears, prayer, and praise.
From the Capitol Hill steps to the halls of the National Cathedral and beyond.
I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth.
The country honored the nation's 41st president, George Herbert Walker Bush. George W. Bush delivered the eulogy for his father, the last person he spoke to before passing away.
I said, "Dad, I love you and you've been a wonderful father." And the last words he would ever say on earth were, "I love you too."
Seated in the front row alongside the Bush family was President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump, along with former Presidents Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter. Christian recording artist Michael W. Smith, a longtime friend of the Bush family, sang Friends.
Though it's hard to let you go, in the Father's hands we know.
It means something because I've been friends with him for 29 years. And so the fact that he wanted me to sing at his funeral, it's just an honor beyond words, it really is.
Smith recalled seeing President Bush a mere months before he passed away.
As we were leaving, we just gave him a hug and said, "Hey, we love you. We love you. Thanks. It's so good to see you." And then, about the time we were back, he kind of get his little finger in the air and he had that little sparkle in his eye. He said, "Friends are friends forever." That's what he said. That's the last thing he said to us.
And now you're singing Friends.
It's crazy. And Deb and I walked out there thinking, you know what? That might be the last time that we see him.
Reverend Dr. Russell Levinson was with the former president in his final days and shared a moment he witnessed between Bush and his former Secretary of State James Baker, a man he called his little brother.
Secretary Baker was at the foot of the president's bed, and toward the end, Jim Baker rubbed and stroked the president's feet for perhaps half an hour. The president smiled at the comfort of his dear friend. Here I witnessed a world leader who was serving a servant who had been our world's leader. And what came to mind was Jesus.
The 94-year-old served his country as president, vice president, World War II veteran, and even CIA director. He guided the U.S. through the Gulf War and the breakup of the Soviet Union.
He stood in the breach against tyranny and discrimination. And on his watch, a wall fell in Berlin. A dictator's aggression did not stand.
But one of his proudest moments was that of a husband and a father. Married more than 7 decades to Barbara, their marriage would bring 6 children, including George, who followed in Dad's footsteps as the country's 43rd president.
A great and noble man, the best father a son or daughter could have. And in our grief, let us smile knowing that Dad is hugging Robin and holding Mom's hand again.
Now, former President Bush is only the 19th person to be honored with a state funeral. His casket is in Houston, Texas for a service, and he will be buried next to his wife Barbara and his daughter Robin, who died at just 3 years old. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the White House.
Thanks, Ben. Coming up, in the cradle of Christianity, modern-day believers are living like the book of Acts.